All right, so we are continuing with one of our top stories that we're following today. We know that a ceasefire in Gaza between Israel and Hamas is set to come into effect this morning, with a hostage release to follow hours later. So it opens the way to a possible end to a 15-month war that has increased tensions within the Middle East. So Qaanitha Hunter is going to be joining us for that discussion, award-winning political journalist, author and founder of The Debrief. Qaanitha, I dare say good morning. There are so many more questions than answers at this point. We're looking at the mood and atmosphere. The world's watching with bated breath. There are reports on official media sites saying that there are technical delays, and there's also been warnings about really what is transpiring as we edge closer to that potential hostage, or to that ceasefire. What's the latest emerging?
Well, Liesl, we know that the 8:30 start of the ceasefire is heavily hinged on Hamas handing over the names of 3 hostages that they will release later in the day. Hamas had just issued a statement saying, and this is cited in local media, saying that that there's technical difficulties in handing over those names. And remember, the ceasefire will not begin until they hand over those 3 names, which obviously starts the agreement to eventually release 33 of the hostages. As part of the agreement, there will be the staggered release of the hostages, obviously old people first, the wounded, men, women and children, and then there will be in exchange the release of 1,000 prisoners expected, Palestinian prisoners who are held in Israeli prisons. The mood is absolutely tense because as troops sort of start moving towards, out of cities like we know, there's developments around Darul Bala, and definitely there was still some bombardments that happened overnight and some casualties. So a very tense situation and a mixed emotions between those who are hopeful that this is the end of the 15-month war and those who believe that they're unsure of what will come.
So Qaanitha, you obviously traveled to Palestine in December. And so as the world watches with bated breath as to what is transpiring, talk to us about your experiences, your observations as well, as we potentially look at that 15-month ceasefire break.
So we know the war in Gaza happened for the last 15 months, but this did not obviously happen completely in isolation. The rest of Palestine was affected. Yes. I traveled to Jerusalem, I traveled to parts of the West Bank over the December Christmas period, and I found obviously a nation that was completely battered, spiritually, emotionally from this war that was persisting for as long as it was. Obviously, the security situation in and around Palestine was extremely tense. More than that, there was this constant, tiptoeing because you don't know, how bad things are going to get on a daily basis. And obviously, as we know that despite the fact that Israel has, sort of mentioned or insisted that this was a war against Hamas in the besieged Gaza Strip, that there were conflicts that ensued in the West Bank, and that this war obviously really did not take away from the existing struggles that the Palestinians have had before October 7. Because remember, this conflict is decades old. That actually what Palestinians are grappling with is an issue around statehood. And so meeting people, you sense an immense amount of resilience, right? An immense amount of uncertainty about what was to come. And at the same time, this kind of 2 worlds that exist between the rest of Palestine and Gaza. And at the same time, you saw even more restrictions to movements, curfews. You saw people describe how, you're not allowed to even wear the Palestinian colors within the Aqsa compound. And so the people that I met had this immense amount of resilience, but at the same time, dejection.
What about the immediate needs? Perhaps just looking at the destruction that obviously has occurred, what did you witness on that front?
So obviously Gaza is completely besieged, no one's allowed in, and no international media has been allowed in for the last 15 months. And we've seen the stories and the images that have come out of Gaza. It's apocalyptic. It's absolutely unbelievable. I don't know how this rebuild even begins to happen. Obviously, we know as part of the ceasefire agreement that 600 aid trucks will be allowed in. The immediate need is the starvation of the people. When I was in Jerusalem, I was invited to a Palestinian home and we were having dinner, and the television news was on about 5 Palestinian babies starved to death in the middle of winter. That cold in Palestine was absolutely brutal. I cannot imagine what it must have been like to be sleeping on the beachfront in Gaza in a flimsy tent when I was, as warm as I was, in comfortable hotels, and yet the cold was absolutely gripping, and you feel that human emotion that comes through. It's a long journey, Liesl. I don't think this starts and ends today at the start of the ceasefire. It's 42 days of tension. I think that there's no certainty until there is certainty, and more than that, I think that this is a huge moment for the international community to rally to the help of the Palestinians who are in dire need, and the people of Gaza. And you're going to see a lot more effort in that regard. And that's why the opening of the Rafah border crossing is so important. Because even before October 7, they were heavily reliant on aid trucks coming in from Egypt. And that was scaled down completely, to which many people, especially, the Special Rapporteur at the United Nations for Palestine, saying that there was a systemic starvation of a people, and to kind of scale that down. So on one hand, it's the stopping of the conflict, but the other hand, it is how do you rebuild an area that has been completely devastated?
No, absolutely. Thank you for contextualizing that question, because as we know, part of that ceasefire, as you alluded to, is the allowing of aid trucks into it. So we're monitoring developments on that front as well. The clock is ticking. It's almost 8:30, but I also want to look at it at your visit to Palestine in relation to being South African, but also just the ICJ case. What South Africa, having stood in solidarity with the Palestinians, have meant? What were some of the sentiments on the ground?
So there was, firstly, a lot of hostility from Israeli soldiers once your South African passport was presented at checkpoints. There was absolute hostility. I was stopped from entering the compound numerous times on the basis that I presented a South African passport. And when, the times that I did inquire, why am I not allowed in? And one soldier was crass enough to say, well, because you're South African. And so the mood is, speaking to other South Africans who had been before, they said obviously it was a lot more hostile in the aftermath of the ICJ case. But there's definitely that hostility. However, I was almost celebrated when I revealed to Palestinian people that I had met in and around Jerusalem, in Hebron, that we are from South Africa. And before there was this kind of only this historical link to South Africa through Mandela and his activism for Palestine. But now South Africans have been positioned as very brave people who have taken on Israel at the International Court of Justice.
So we are going to continue with that discussion and explore those sentiments further. Thank you for that at this hour.